Welcome everybody to the December 27th meeting of the Planning, Resource and Development, 28th rather. Yeah, 28th meeting of the Planning, Resource and Development Committee. I can see from our screen that I think everyone from the committee is present. And we're also joined by our County Board Chair Bartlett. So with that, we have a quorum and I'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the minutes from December 14th.
Supervisor Bjork makes the motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Gary. Is there a second? Or more seconds? Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. We do have two pre-submitted public comments. Do we have any online comments, Krista?
There are no other comments.
Okay, then I'll ask Chase to read the two comments that came in writing.
You bet. Okay, the first public comment was received on Sunday, December 26th from Catherine Stahl. And she says, hello, I would appreciate you sharing the following in the PR&D public comments at the 12/28/2021 meeting. Thank you, Catherine Stahl. Thank you for your consideration for considering the Water Resources Council that was recommended by the Ad Hoc Groundwater Committee. And thank you, Chase Cummings, for suggesting concerns you have about such a council. I'd like to add some thoughts as I was one of the original advocates for instituting the Water Resources Council. I can think of no other organization that could pull together various Dunn County concerned voices about water better than the county. By the county, I am referring to PR&D and the Health and Human Services committees and the departments associated with the two committees. Due to your authority, responsibility to represent the citizens of the whole county, you can pull together those who have impact on and are impacted by the water quality and quantity within our watershed, whereas other groups are primarily seen as special interest groups. From my perspective, there would be many goals and accomplishments from forming the council, such as ongoing structured dialogue among those who have differing interests in the quality and quantity of water in Dunn County. Currently, there is no ongoing opportunity where people with divergent interests respectfully learn from one another and work toward the common goal of healthy county waters. Current experience and research about water quality and quantity from the many divergent expert representatives on the council, accessible to county policymakers, the county agency implementers, and town boards. Towns also need access to the expertise that such a council offers. Multiple outreach sources of information to Dunn County citizens about county water quality and quantity by way of each Water Resources Council representative's contact with his or her constituency and council reports to the general public. Broadly and well-considered policy advocacy to the county, towns within the county, and to the relevant state legislators and state agencies to promote Dunn County water quality and sustained quantity on an annual basis, and as issues arise, needing quick response. Often government groups have a series of steps or have limitations to providing advocacy, whereas the council could be more nimble in providing policy feedback. Diverse input to an annual State of Dunn County Waters report that gives trends over time, a snapshot of current situation, current comprehensive list of efforts to address water quality, a list of what needs to be done to address unresolved water quality and quantity, and goals for water quality and quantity to be achieved in Dunn County within 1 year, 5 years, and 20 years. A centralized digital library of information about various factors impacting clean water available to the public. Maintain deep and broad base of best management practices for water quality that is inclusive of the many various impacts on water quality and accessible to all professionals and general public. Citizen engagement in the life-sustaining natural resource of Dunn County. To accomplish the above goals, I would recommend the Water Resources Council include each equally important: public health sanitarian or public health representative, PR&D committee county supervisor, Dunn County water specialist, Farmers Union representative, Farm Bureau representative, member of a farmer-led council, environmental engineer from Dunn County Engineer Firm, municipal water treatment director, septic hauler, plumber, septic system installer, well driller, UW Stout Environmental Science Program Director, NRCS Conservationist, representative from Dunn County NGO Conservation Group, as an example, HEAT, 2 rural Dunn County residents with private wells from divergent areas of the county, urban-based Dunn County resident using municipal water, CAFO owner, preferably dairy given county abundance, a row crop farmer, farmer of smaller size farm of animal husbandry or produce, Colfax or UW Stevens Point water testing expert, town board representative, county zoning division representative. Members of the Water Resources Council would be appointed by the chairs of the PR&D and Health and Human Services Board, with recommendations from both Chase Cummings and KT Gallagher. The appointees would be selected due to their unique knowledge of use of water, their ability to respectfully listen to others, and to share meaningful information, and work as a team toward improving the water quality of Dunn County. This would be an advisory committee to the county and to townships within the county. There are obviously several challenges to this model. The list of participants is long. However, without broad representation, the Water Resources Council will not be able to credibly and comprehensively voice concerns and accomplish effective goals. No other group within Dunn County has such diverse voices to make the above goals knowledgeably happen. To reduce the council numbers, it could be one individual may be suited to competently represent 2 of the listed constituencies. Without adequate structure for the council, meetings can become primarily conflictual dialogue with no increased awareness of common goals and action steps and meaningful information about each constituency. This speaks to the importance of having 2 skillful facilitators that can keep the dialogue respectful while acknowledging differences of interest and opinions. Without specific goals necessary for the council to accomplish, meetings can become talk sessions with little meaningful results. If this occurs, busy people will eventually quit as they need to see accomplishments. This speaks to the importance of initially developing specific, meaningful goals the council would need to accomplish within specific timeframes. Also, it speaks to having facilitators who can maintain group focus. Time necessary from the schedules of already overbooked individuals can reduce interest in such an effort and feel impossible to add still another meeting to their schedules. Careful forethought to the structure, process, and goals of the council will be necessary to make it worthwhile, attractive for each participant to see what's in it for them as an individual and the constituency they represent, what's in it for the county and for our water. I welcome the opportunity to discuss the above thoughts further, but this is already long enough. Respectfully submitted, Catherine Stahl, Dunn County resident. And the second public comment was received Thursday, December 23rd. It states, Dear PR&D Committee, as 2021 comes to a close, this is the last meeting of the PR&D Committee for 2021. I will make my public comments known to this committee. I strongly support water testing across Dunn County to establish a baseline evaluation of the groundwater in Dunn County. I have concerns relating to what I've witnessed this year. I have witnessed the harvest of a corn crop, the installation of a high-capacity well, this installation of a new irrigation system, as well as a CAFO being allowed to spread liquid manure this coming spring. This new field is in the village of Colfax village limits. Another CAFO has gained more fields through renting or leasing of land on a field just west of the avenue I live on. Will there be any testing of existing residential wells immediately adjacent to this new field that is approved for the spreading of liquid manure? As CAFOs expand, so does the requirement about amount of land that they need to spread liquid manure. I have followed Dunn County for years related to conservation practices. I praise the results of the LOSG, Livestock Operations Study Group, the Dunn County Ad Hoc Committee on Groundwater Report, the Manure Management Ordinance, and other efforts. I feel there should be action relating to well testing when CAFOs update their NMP and more fields are subject to the spreading of liquid manure. The existing residential housing adjacent or near the new field should have their wells tested as a requirement before any land spreading of liquid manure is applied to this new field. This establishes a baseline for future monitoring and evaluation. 2019 was the year of groundwater per Governor Evers. We're headed to 2021. Have the counties in this state been given the funding to expand their water testing efforts? I have contacted my elected officials regarding the groundwater and will continue to do so. I want my grandkids to know that their grandpa did all he could to make sure the groundwater is safe if they decide to live in this county in the future. Respectfully, Terry Nichols, Town of Colfax. And that concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Chase. And these address, we really appreciate the work that went into getting these thoughtful comments to us. So thank you, Terry and Catherine. And I think this topic will come up a little later in the agenda, so we'll have the time to perhaps reflect on these. Let's see, Tom Carlson, I was going to ask you this before the meeting, but do you think it would be appropriate to move item 8 up? I don't know if the Bartzes are listening or have any comments.
Yes, I think that would be certainly appropriate, and Renee has joined the meeting. She is with us. So if you'd like to do that, I'm sure it would be much appreciated.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Well, then, without objection from the committee, let's move item 8 up to the current place on the agenda, after number 4, and consider the request for a variance. Tom, you want to lead us through this?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So what you have in your packet here is a staff report that ENS staff have put together. I'll just give you some quick background. Mark and Renee Bartz are the applicant. They own approximately 160 acres of land in section 28, town of New Haven. Property is currently unzoned. The applicant is proposing to create a 1.82 acre parcel. And I'll just get down here to the survey map. So the applicant is proposing to create a roughly 1.82 acre parcel. The purpose is for splitting off an existing home from the remainder of the property, which is currently being used for agricultural purposes. The proposed new lot contains an existing home, a well, and a septic. A portion of the proposed parcel is located within the 100-year floodplain of the Bowlin Creek, which is located just west of the home and building site. The creation of this new parcel requires compliance with Chapter 16 of our Land Division Ordinance. Specifically, Section 16.403 of the ordinance reads in part, all parcels shall have a minimum of 10,000 square feet of contiguous land lying a vertical distance of 2 feet above the regional floodplain. The proposed parcel that you see in front of you here doesn't meet this requirement. So the applicant has made a request for a variance to waive this 10,000 square foot requirement. Section 16.405 of the Land Division Ordinance allows for a variance request and is worded as follows. Where in the judgment of the department and or committee, it would be inappropriate to apply literally the provisions of Chapter 16 because exceptional or undue hardship would result, the staff or committee may waive or modify any county requirement to the extent deemed just and proper. When such relief is granted, it shall be without detriment to the public good, without impairment to the intent and purpose of this ordinance. So the ENS department has reviewed the applicant's request. The purpose of floodplain regulations, of course, is to the greatest extent possible, discourage development areas that will be impacted by the 100-year flood event. The base flood elevation for the proposed new lot ranges from 986 feet to 988 feet. I'm going to bring up another application here. Hopefully everybody can see this. This is the county GIS website. So the Bartzes own this block of 440s right in here that I'm going around with my cursor. And on the mainly in the southwest and a little piece of the southeast, they want to carve out this new parcel. So the 100-year flood elevation I have turned on here on my map It ranges from about 986 feet to 988 back here near the buildings. So using a very conservative approach, if we're looking for that 10,000 square foot requirement, we'd have to be at the 990 foot contour. Let me just turn those contours on here really quick. So this dark heavy contour back here that my mouse is going over, that's the 990 foot contour. You can see it's a considerable distance away from the buildings. This area is very, very flat out here. So to get 10,000 square feet that meets our ordinance requirement, they would have to be way back here on the north end of these fields up near the woods. So just keeping that in perspective. So right now, the proposed new lot contains no land whatsoever that would count towards this 10,000 square foot requirement. The existing home on the property has existed within what is now mapped floodplain for a considerable amount of time. I believe in the letter that Renee and Mark provided was 1975 that the house was there. We'll get to their letter here in a moment. Because the associated flood or improvements have existed prior to the adoption date of Chapter 15, which is our Dunn County zoning floodplain ordinance, that ordinance was adopted October 19th, 2011. So these structures are deemed as non-conforming uses. They existed prior to the adoption of our floodplain ordinance. So from a zoning perspective, the non-conforming use can continue as is. However, no modifications or additions to the non-conforming use or structure shall be permitted unless they comply with appropriate provisions of the floodplain ordinance. The proposed parcel contains mainly land that is currently being used for residential purposes. If we zoom in here, I will just run a quick polygon around with the photo on, but roughly this is the extents of the parcel that they're trying to create. So basically the improvements and some of the yard that they're mowing. If the proposed parcel were at least 20 acres or greater in size, we wouldn't be having this discussion this morning because a certified survey map is required on all new parcels under 20 acres. So one option is they could convey this off with at least 20 acres of land. Doing so though would, certainly go into some productive farmland here, which they don't want to do. So if granted, the variance would allow the existing home to be parceled off separately from the remainder of the productive farmland. So we have to look at our variance requirements. And one of those is it would be inappropriate to apply literally the provisions of Chapter 16 because exceptional or undue hardship would result. So literal enforcement of our ordinance would result in undue hardship in this instance. Creating a new parcel on this site in compliance with a 10,000 square foot requirement would require enlarging the parcel to include additional land which is higher in elevation. And as I discussed here a short time ago, they would have to enlarge this parcel a considerable distance to the north to get into those contours that are at 990 feet. The hardship is not self-imposed, meaning the landowner did not create the hardship, in this case, the floodplain. So enlarging the parcel could result in the loss of productive farmland. So there the contours are again. The variance shall be without detriment to the public good and without impairment to the intent and purpose of this ordinance. Section 16.102 outlines the purposes of the land division ordinance. I'll just go through them really quick. Reducing congestion in the streets or highways, furthering the orderly layout and use of the land, securing safety from fire, panic, or other dangers, providing adequate light and air, avoiding undue or improper concentration of population, facilitating adequate provisions for transportation, water, sewer, schools, parks, playgrounds, and other public requirements, and facilitating where appropriate further re-subdivision of larger tracts into smaller parcels. So staff have reviewed these variance requirements, and we feel that, certainly what the applicant is looking for is in line with our ordinance and meets those variance requirements. So at this point, based on the above analysis and variance requirements, department staff is recommending approval of the Bartz's variance request. I'm going to bring up another document here. So this is the certified survey map. This is roughly where the parcel sits in relation to the floodplain. I guess the biggest thing I look at when factoring all this information is that, certainly the house is there, the floodplain is there. And if the house does in fact flood at some point, it's not going to matter if it's sitting on a 2-acre parcel or a 202-acre parcel. That the fact is the buildings are there and they are a non-conforming structure. So certainly I think it's wise to put it on a smaller parcel, convey it off as a separate parcel, and not intrude into the nearby productive farmland. I do have a letter here from the Bartzes. I'm not going to read it. This was in your packets. And I don't have anything additional to add unless there are questions from the committee. I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. And Renee is on the call with us. So if there are any questions for Renee, I'm sure she'd be glad to answer those as well.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Does the committee have any questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, like one question.
Yes, Terry, yeah.
If that parcel is sold, even though to a family member, would there have to be some kind of a statement to the effect that it is in the floodplain? You know?
I don't know. I would imagine that that any mortgage lender would want some certification about that, but I don't know. Renee, do you know? Can you answer that question?
I don't know that answer to that either. I do know that
Okay.
the lender is aware of all
Yeah.
this, aware of this meeting and this variance that we've applied for.
And
Okay.
if I may, I can speak from personal experience. Having taken mortgages out in the past, I know I have paid, look at my line item on my bill, and I have paid for a flood check. So I believe that's something I think is I don't want to say standard, but I know it happened when I bought land before. They certainly did a flood check as part of my loan application.
Right.
And there's a note, the certified survey map certainly discloses that. I mean, the 100-year flood contour is shown on here. So yeah, I think certainly somebody's going to look into that, especially if there's a lender involved. But as far as on the actual conveyance document, when title is conveyed, I don't know that there's certainly no legal requirement to, list that information on the deed that transfers title. But other documents, there certainly may be a flood check done as part of the home building process and mortgaging of the property.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Any other questions? Yeah,
Mr.
David.
Chair, I just want to point out and emphasize what Tom mentioned, that the buildings are there, that okaying this is not going to change where the buildings are, and that it is, it's not going to change anything. I want to emphasize that whether the home is sitting on a 2-acre parcel or whatever it is, 1 point whatever, compared to a 20-acre parcel, it's not going to change anything. So I don't see any problem with it.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, I agree with Chairman Bartlett's comments, and also it does sort of keep the agricultural land in connection, which will increase its ability to be used in the future. So it serves a public interest there also. Any other questions or points? Anyone want to make a motion to approve the variance request?
Mr. Chairman,
I hear Jim Anderson.
Yes, I would like to move approval of this, Mr. Chairman.
And Diane Morehouse.
I will certainly second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, request is approved.
And Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
Just some housekeeping. So the certified survey map on sheet 2 does have an approval block for the PR&D committee. So you will need to sign that, Tom, on behalf of the committee. So I would encourage Mark and Renee, you need to get a hold of Tom Quinn and set up a time to have him. So you'll need the final certified survey map in hand, signed and sealed by your surveyor, the recordable copy, and that'll have to you'll need to coordinate with Chairman Quinn to get his signature and date on that prior to taking it to the Register of Deeds to record it, okay? Just so everybody's clear.
Okay.
Yeah, so Renee used to be one of my babysitters a long time ago for my kids. It's been a long time since we've seen you guys,
Yeah.
but I'll be around all week and I'm happy to figure out a time to get together with you.
Okay, I'll give you a call when you're done with your meeting here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, what's next year? I guess we don't have a public hearing. Staff reports, review of the groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations. Chase, I think you were gonna.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So typically we have this agenda item on our second meeting of every month, and the last 2 months it's been canceled. So it's been a while since we've revisited this. So you'll see a few things highlighted in blue here that may be new since October, the last time we had a conversation about this. I'd be happy to go through and discuss any details that you have, but in your packet, you should have seen some of those updates. Obviously, the land division ordinance is on its track moving forward. And I've included a few other things there regarding rounding out our year on nutrient management and our cost share funds that we had available for that. Yeah, Tom, if you want to just scroll down here. Our well water viewer does have a public, I guess it's available to the public now via its online presence, and it will see its full link and full advertisement here when the new website for the county is updated here in the next few months. So we have provided a bunch of content for that that we've compiled here within our office, and I guess as part of a companion to that well water viewer. So we're excited to roll that out here in the near future, and hopefully we'll have some comments regarding it at that time. Feel free to scroll down one more, Tom. I think. And just a few other things here on the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers, Farmer-led group. Again, this past year included private well water testing as part of their grant and part of their initiatives and activities. So we're still awaiting results on that, but that will focus on some of those watersheds just north of Colfax. And then the last couple things here, we'll talk about regarding the Water Resources Council. But before we get into that, I guess, is there any other questions on the other groundwater ad hoc recommendations?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Chase, a question on the cost share for the nutrient management plan. not the cost share, but the NMP. It said 700 acres. Is that a single farmer? Is it multiple farmers?
I believe this year it would end up being 2 farmers.
Okay.
So we had one large acreage for one farm, and then a smaller acreage for another. So just a reminder, the cost share $28,000 gets us 700 acres based on the required cost share rate of $40 per acre, which in theory is $10 per acre per year for 4 years. So that's paid up front.
Okay.
And then the nutrient management plan must be followed or applied to that cropland or that ag land for as long as it's farmed. So
right.
There is a long-term compliance requirement with that. But based on the funding sources we have at this time, that's the number of acres we're able to accomplish in any given year.
Okay. So it inches up our participation rate slightly.
Yeah, it's one of the tools. It's not the only tool to establish nutrient management on the land. So there are many other ways. There's other permitting requirements at the state level, as well as just landowner willingness to adopt it on their own or through other cost share funding sources such as NRCS or through farmer-led watershed councils as well. So One other thing I would mention regarding the general groundwater ad hoc recommendations. I'm working with staff in the Land and Water Conservation Division to develop individual work plans for 2022. And we are being intentional about including these ad hoc recommendations into those work plans in order to make continuous progress on them. And so hopefully as the year progresses for 2022, you will see more in-depth conversation and discussion and updates on some of these other items that we maybe haven't quite gotten to here in the last year plus. So.
Thanks, Chase. Any questions to Chase or comments about the chart?
Well, Mr. Chairman, a comment if I might.
Sure.
Chase, I really appreciate highlighting some of the things for me when I read through all of your great accomplishments and highlighting them in blue. Thank you very much. I have a question. Why are we waiting results yet on something that happened in October for testing for nitrates and bacteria in private wells? How long does that take?
Yeah, that's a good point, Supervisor Anderson. I guess to be honest, I didn't get the information in time to put this in as part of the packet. So I'll have to follow up with that. At that time, those results were just submitted. If there was a positive hit for bacteria, we would have found out about that quite recently or quite soon. But if there isn't, then sometimes those results take a little bit more time. And then likely those results were going right directly to the landowner. And by the time we compile all that information and get it into our hands, it takes a little bit more time. But you're correct. We probably should have those results in hand already. I just don't have them at my fingertips right now or as made part of this report. So I can follow up with that if you would like.
Well, I thank you, Chase, and I agree with you. I think if there was a problem, you would have heard earlier. I guess my interest is, we're talking about that nitrate level of 10 parts per million. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Chase?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was just curious as to where some of those results are fitting. So I'm fine with that. Sometime maybe you and I could talk, or if the rest of the committee is interested, we could hear more about that. No, thank you. Good report. Appreciate it.
I would just add that maybe, because this is part of the Farmer-Led Watershed Council, typically there's some reporting requirements for that. And I believe in the past, those may have been shared as part of some of our reporting back to the committee. So I'll work with Steve in our office on that and could provide that at a future date too.
Yep, appreciate it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, David.
for my own information, this has to do with kind of the same, or the question that Supervisor Morehouse asked. That amount of money, you said $10 an acre for a nutrient management plan. What does it cost a farmer to do that? Or are they so totally different that you can't give an estimate? But I'm just wondering, the commitment on the farmer in the future, because you said that they have to keep doing that. You mentioned that before, they have to keep it going. So is the amount of money that's the cost share, is that enough to get the plan going to begin with? Or do they still have to put more money in it to get it going?
Good questions, Chairman Bartlett. So basically, in theory, the cost share rate, that $10 per acre per year for 4 years, so $10 is thought to be around 70% cost share, which is an ongoing rate for many of the conservation practices in the state, and also required as part of our ag performance standards and mineral storage management ordinance. So it's the actual cost to develop a nutrient management plan from scratch is much different than one that you're updating. A large portion of the cost is collecting soil samples and running samples through a lab. So this, the rate to do that's going to vary depending on how many samples you're collecting. If you have, you know, a 40-acre field versus 400 acres, there's going to be different expenses associated with that. So the cost share, when it's all paid up front of $40 per acre, is sufficient to fund that entire plan, and in theory is cost sharing for the next 3 years. So basically 4 years of cost share. The thought and the intent, I believe, and as well as the reality of nutrient management planning is proper nutrient management planning and implementation is I would say an advisable and a beneficial business decision for agriculture, looking at the nutrients applied to cropland to make sure that the crop is getting what it needs to be productive, but also not spending more money on nutrients than is necessary. So there's a balance there, and I think it's an economic as well as an environmental benefit to have a nutrient management plan. So while there is some incentive to establish a nutrient management plan as to meeting whether that's state or county requirements, there is a long-term benefit. And even though that it is required for as long as that land is farmed, the benefit of having that nutrient management plan should be part of a baseline expectation and part of a base business decision for agriculture to find the incentive and find the necessary economic benefits to maintain that for as long as it's farmed. So while, like I said, while there's some cost share up front, it should get a plan established, maintaining it and implementing it throughout its extended life should see benefits for that farmer as well.
So it sounds like a win-win for everything going around. You know, the cost share pays for the initial plan. Keeping it going, you're going to have efficiencies and savings in your farming organization. So it just seems like it's a no-brainer that more farmers would buy into this. Is it maybe because people don't understand it? You know, don't understand the benefits that if they you know, can get into this cost share program, that it's going to benefit them business wise, or what's holding us back in our county compared to other counties?
Yeah, very, very good observations and good comments. And I think, so let me back up a little bit. In my general experience, and I believe is widely understood, that the majority of agricultural producers are doing some sort of nutrient management. Most farmers out there are not spending money on nitrogen to just throw it out there to get the biggest yield without having some conscious effort of looking at how much that's going to cost and for what return they're getting. So there is a level of nutrient management that's taking place already just based on economics, but also many landowners and farmers are working through agronomists to pull soil samples to make sure that those decisions are being made based on soil test levels, in addition to crop yield goals. So there is a level of nutrient management that's taking place already. The difference with having that level of nutrient management versus the level of nutrient management we're talking about through a nutrient management plan that meets a required standard is that the conservation practice standard, or the 590, is conservation practice standard 590. So if you hear someone refer to their 590 plan, that is their official nutrient management plan that is accepted by the state and by us at the county, that meets those basic requirements of a basic nutrient management framework, but also goes above that to look at restrictive mapping, looking at those slopes and timing of nutrient applications, and making sure that liquid manure or some other biosolid manure is not being applied to land that is steeply sloped or too close to surface water. Looking at things above and beyond just production of agriculture. So the benefits of having a 590 nutrient management plan go beyond just having those basic core, pulling a soil sample and penciling out your economics behind your nutrients. So there is I think a hesitation by many as to, well, I'm already doing some sort of nutrient management. Why do I need to have this plan that goes above and beyond what I'm already doing? And I think to the benefit of not only the producer that implements that nutrient management plan, but to the greater benefit of the public, the 590 standard is the requirement. Now, in order to implement that and require that 590 standard to a nutrient management plan, we have to offer cost share in many cases. And the incentive for the cost share is, like I mentioned before, it seems like you mentioned, it seems like a no-brainer. However, the terms perpetuity, once you receive that cost share, you have to follow a nutrient management plan on that cropland for as long as it is farmed, is a deterrent, frankly. And it's, I think it's part of our work is continued work, and it's always will be as part of is education and being able to educate landowners on what the benefits of a nutrient management plan are beyond just your basics. And basically, like I mentioned before, I look at us as somewhat used car salesmen. We need to sell conservation and help people provide the information to people, help them make those choices to pursue it. And that's some of the hesitation with nutrient management. And honestly, the other ones is, it's part of government regulation and government programming that a lot of people tend to shy away from. So, we might be, lower on the adoption list in our region, but we certainly aren't alone in the state for low nutrient management requirements or adoption. Counties that have high percentages of nutrient management implementation or adoption also have other programs associated with it, like the Farmland Preservation Program, for example, or certain county zoning, exclusive ag zoning, where tax credits are an additional incentive on top of cost share. And you'll see greater adoption in those counties. I think we're on a path heading in the right direction. I think the new updated manure storage management ordinance is one of our tools. But I think that's been tried to be the selling point, is that this nutrient management plan will benefit you in the long run. And it's just a matter of working with individuals on a case-by-case situation to make sure their needs are met and hope that they understand that and can move forward. So I hope I answered your question. It's a challenging one that isn't unique to us, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chase. Keep up the good work.
I would just add if you don't mind, Chairman Quinn, before we get into the Water Resource Council discussion, Supervisor Bjork, you had asked questions last time about the well intel program and some of our other well monitoring. And I haven't forgotten about that. I did not include that in this report today, but I do intend to do that at our next month's meeting. Steve Olson in our office that works primarily with that program. We're just trying to wrap up a lot of grant information and reporting here right now at the end of the year, but I just want to let you know that I didn't forget, and we'll get to that next month if that's okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. I think you're on mute, Supervisor Quinn.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Chase. Why don't you move on then to the
Okay.
water quality?
So it's been a while. It's been since October that we discussed the Water Resources Council. It was requested by this committee to make this topic a little bit more intentional as part of our conversation. So back in October, I provided a version of this document that was in your packet. I've added a couple things, but one of the takeaways from that meeting was to send out a link to Eau Claire County's Groundwater Advisory Council or Committee. I believe you should have received that in an email from me shortly after that meeting in October. I did include some of that content, highlights of that, of Eau Claire's committee towards the end of this document. And then, like I said, we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this for a couple meetings now. So I'm not sure how in depth you want to go today. Obviously, we've had some public comments that provided good input on the process and intention of the Water Resources Council. So I guess I'll kick it back to all of you as to how much you would like to discuss, where you want to go, and I guess the questions I have regarding the intent of the Water Resources Council and how do we structure it and what role does it play?
Thanks, Chase. Why don't we kind of take some time, not a whole lot, but some time today to just share some thoughts and general discussion about this, given the public comments we've had and the material that Chase has provided. So anybody have any thoughts they want to share at this point? I've got a couple. I thought to me, it seems like it feels like this is a hard thing to get right. And if it's not right, it won't work and it's a waste of time and money. So I think we need to take the time to figure out what we think will best work. And I think that the public comments we've gotten have been helpful to that regard. And Chase's presentation of this is helpful also. And I struggle with, at the last meeting, we identified some kind of a baseline water quality survey as a priority for the committee in advocating for potential use of COVID grant funds. And I don't know if we want to include something like this in that, but it does strike me that to do this is going to take significant staff support. And that is either contracted support, which costs money, or it's allocation of staff time, which basically costs money, but it's not going to happen without that. Anyway, so I have to say that I'm a little skeptical that it can work. I like very much the idea that this would be a body where there could be an opportunity to have real thoughtful dialogue, even sometimes contentious dialogue, if needed, about some difficult issues, but have that dialogue in a civil manner. That may be the biggest contribution it could make. When I looked through the material on Eau Claire, and maybe I'm not reading it right, but like I read through the minutes from their meetings. And if you go down to where you talk about that, Chase.
I think it'll be right towards the bottom, Tom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There you go. So more, the Eau Claire Committee, which was set up about, I think in 2018, had these three goals. And as far as I can tell from reading the minutes, the one goal they have accomplished was to develop a countywide report on groundwater, which proposes some of the potential solutions. But that was completed in 2019, I think, and with consultant help. And then since then, honestly, maybe I'm missing something, but the minutes of the committee meeting don't seem very engaged, or maybe I'm wrong, but they just don't see, it doesn't seem like the advisory committee has been able to get itself to the point that it resembles something like what we want to have in Dunn County. So very few, like the only real practical thing that they've discussed was a specific problem with development of a feedlot within the municipal wellhead protection area, which is something that could have been handled by, or would typically be handled by our PR&D committee within this regular order of business, I would think. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Chase. I mean, you've been watching all of this develop.
Yeah, I spoke with Eau Claire County, my counterpart in Eau Claire County, about their work over there. And as with we've experienced over the last couple of years, I think we've been subject to the consequences of COVID and progress on our ad hoc committee recommendations. Not the only excuse, but one of them. And I think Eau Claire has experienced that as well. Their groundwater advisory committee really their minimum, they meet a minimum of 4 times per year. So it's a quarterly meeting that they don't meet very regularly. So what I gathered out of that was it wasn't real clear as to what type of information came through them. So obviously there was one thing that I mentioned here, and Chairman Quinn, you brought up too, about a specific issue with a feedlot in that wellhead protection area, which probably saw some benefit of running through a groundwater advisory committee to provide a recommendation to a committee such as this, the PR&D committee. So from my perspective, looking at and one of my considerations for our Water Resource Council would be is what role, or what is the role of that committee, and is it purely providing recommendation to the PR&D committee for decisions, and is that duplicative in nature? Is there ways that we can, as staff, bring in experts to speak on certain topics that the committee might request? I will say that, I agree with Kathy Stahl's comments in many ways. I have shared those same thoughts in the past and was part of the initiation for the Pepin County Water Advisory Group. And my experience, I mentioned at a previous meeting, that kind of faded away based on some of those concerns of not really having good direction, not having good facilitation. And while it was intended to be exactly what has been discussed here today and in the public comments about getting diverse opinions and interest in one room to have a civil conversation, without good direction and good facilitation, that just doesn't, my experience is it hasn't been successful. And I think after a while, those that maybe need to be in the room that have the largest impact on our land use don't show up. And then it's more difficult as to what we're trying to accomplish. So I think there are benefits from having a Water Resources Council. I think there are ways that we can utilize that type of entity in a way that is unique to Dunn County. I'm just not certain I have a long enough tenure here yet to know the reality of its success. And again, I would refer back to all of you in how you feel and what your intentions are with such a council. And if we are going to do it, making sure that we have the commitment from all staff at the county and being able to incorporate that into our work planning, but then also having proper facilitation. And, you know, I was a facilitator in Pepin County and also tried to provide the content and the discussion. And for me, it just didn't work out. It's hard to facilitate a meeting and contribute to the meeting at the same time. So I would be looking to you or I guess I would be looking for an outside facilitator in some way to help with this process. So I know that's a long answer but there's just a lot going on, a lot to consider with this thing. So I'll be happy to keep talking if you'd like me to.
Anybody else have thoughts they want to share?
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, may I?
Mr. Chairman.
It's Mike.
I'll start with Supervisor Morehouse and then I'll go to Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, at risk of being redundant, I mean, I have had some misgivings about the purpose and function of this council since it was proposed. And those concerns got magnified with Mr. Cummings' presentation a couple of months ago. And so, again, being redundant, without, I think, probably very skillful facilitation, I just don't see how this would work. And Ms. Stahl also pointed that out in her really thoughtful public comment. So my question is about, I mean, assuming that we wish to go forward, how would we support that kind of facilitation? There will be, Mr. Chairman, as you've pointed out, there are going to be costs. And it doesn't seem to me that we have a lot of extra resources to devote to that. So I'm not sure that it is either appropriate or if our staff have the time to devote to facilitation. So that would be number one. And number two is, could we afford to bring in a skillful facilitator or two from the outside? And how would we support that?
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson, I think you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I compliment all of you. This is important, and obviously all of you put a lot of thought into this and have ideas. I'll start out with the two letters that we got from one from Kathy Stahl and Terry Nichols. Those letters were great. Much thought went into them. Obviously, very beneficial, and I think we appreciate them, and I was very impressed. Thank you to you two people for that. I think we call this an ad hoc. To me, the word ad hoc means this is specific for one particular purpose and limited time and only that. And if you will bear with me a minute, I think of the acronym SMART. And that helps me to remember when we have a committee. SMART means specific, the S, and that is what we are. We're specific. The M means, is it measurable? We need to determine, just like at Eau Claire County, what do we want to accomplish and be able to find out at the end of 3 years or whatever that we did. And the A stands for attainable. Can we do it? Can it get done? Otherwise, it's a waste, like you said, Chairman Quinn. It's a waste of everybody's time if it isn't attainable. And then the R means realistic. Man, is this ever? We need to do it, and not just say, can't it be done? I think it's realistic. And finally, the T in SMART is timely, and it meets all that criteria to me of the acronym of SMART. So from my perspective is, you're right, Chairman Quinn, if we're going to do it, we got to do it right. And we're going to have stumbling blocks. There are going to be times when we're set back, and that's okay. However, I hope we'll pursue this and continue to go on, and eventually we will get it right. And so you, Chase, thank you very much for your leadership on this. I'm impressed, and I think if we look at what Eau Claire County's done and what we've done with the other people in our county, again, thank you to Kathy and Terry for your good letters, and this committee and your leadership. I want to continue to pursue this and we will get it right. And finally, I want to say this, not finally, excuse me, but economics has a lot to do with this. And right now we all know that fertilizer costs are going up. And when the price of commodities goes up, that causes a farmer, and Gary Bjork would know this better than any of us because he's a farmer, that makes a difference. And how much you use as compared to what we call point of diminishing return. How much more fertilizer can I get for how much more production? And those things will always be with us. They always have been, they always will be. So our role as a committee is to try to make sure that, and we get new farmers all the time, younger farmers coming in. So it's a continuum. No, I've gone way too long. But that's my comment. I hope we can keep this going, Mr. Chairman, and pursue it, and then we will get it right. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thanks. Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. Any other comments?
Supervisor.
Yes. Yep.
I didn't want to speak right away because I think I kind of echoed what you said. It really be difficult to do this, and if you don't do it right, it's worse than not doing it. I look at it and it's theoretically really good. And I looked at Eau Claire's, you meet 4 times a year. That's not enough to be consistent and have any continuity. But if you meet more than that, then you've got people using their time. Is the role really, I don't know, it almost seems like the role is to make the participants feel like they have some input, and maybe that's not bad. But what happens then when they have input and PR&D or the other committee says that we don't agree? We have difficulties with that in our budgeting and committees. So I think we should continue to look at it, but I'm skeptical that we can really make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else?
Chairman Quinn,
Yes, Mr. Burke.
I had a hard time like you'll hear in Michael, but the results of the Pepin County committee and the Eau Claire County committee doesn't seem to have a lot of promise to it. And I think we're making a lot of progress right now just with our goals that we're working on all the time with the farmer-led watersheds and that. I think because I think the other one would be so big and unruly that, and yet you got to have everybody involved, all facets of county citizens. I'm having questions if that would be feasible, but I think we're making like good progress in what we're doing right now.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. I don't want to beat this to death today because we're going to be coming back to this, but let me just say, as my prerogative as chair, to offer one last comment, and that's we're a couple things. One, we're at a point in the next month or two where we're going to be making some decisions about budgets. And I think we have this in mind as something we might want to do, but it's going to require some kind of allocation or reallocation of funds. And so this gives us something to include in that discussion. But how that discussion rests, how it settles, will have a lot to do about whether or not there's any resources right now available for this. And then 2, this doesn't have to start by being everything. We could say this is the most important thing we need right now. This one thing, let's focus on that. For example, if you asked me that question, I would argue that my priority would be, let's build a forum, an ongoing and thoughtful forum where we can bring in and develop and present information about water quality and groundwater to a regular group of people, but also to citizens at large who want to sit in and participate, so that there be an opportunity in the county, sponsored by the county, for everybody to engage in a community education about the issue. Not so much with a focus on what are we going to do, but trying to understand what the options are, what the problems are, what the solutions might be. And if there are, in fact, problems where there may not be any. But that whole civic dialogue process, to me, would be, if we pick one thing to start with, I would say that might be one thing to start with. So let's let this go for now. I really appreciate Chase pulling this together, the public comments we've gotten. We are going to revisit this, and we're going to keep looking at ways to figure out if it makes sense or if it can be managed in a way that makes sense. So thanks for everybody's comments. I had promised this was going to be a short meeting, and I failed you as committee chair, so I apologize for that. But I think we had a good discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Anyone else have final comments?
Yeah, I didn't get your attention before you talked, but I just wanted to, I really see a benefit of hearing from all these people or groups. But what I'm hesitant about is whether we can keep it going, because can we afford it? Like a couple of the other supervisors mentioned. I think the biggest thing is is there going to be per diems, staff time? If you're looking at 20 people or above, you're looking at, what's it going to cost every time you have a meeting, with staff time and per diems. And if we don't put a priority on water quality and spending money for that, then people are going to get frustrated and not keep coming to the meetings because nothing's going to happen. Like, say we have meetings for a year, comes budget time, we don't put any money into anything of their recommendations, people are going to get frustrated with that. I think in the past, myself, I see a real quality, good way to spend money would be on testing wells. I think that'd be wonderful if we could do that. But our priority has not been to put money in testing wells, because we're putting money in all the other good things that we do. And we haven't made testing wells a priority above anything else we're doing. And I'm just afraid having a committee, I think there's some real benefits to being able to advise the PR&D committee how to go or decisions they make. But I'm hesitant of whether we're going to put a priority on water quality or quantity. I think we should be testing wells in every township. I think, and not just quality, but quantity. Because over the last 10 years or so, I think I counted it up once, and there's over 10 high capacity wells that have gone in. Maybe it's the last 15 years, but within a 2-mile radius of where I live. And what's that done to the water quantity for my area? I don't know. I know that neighboring farms have had to drill new wells because they haven't been able to have enough water for their herds anymore. So I just think that when we decide we want to do something, we also have to decide, are we going to support it in the future? And what I look at is I don't think we've supported water quality, quantity quite as much as we could have. And maybe we can't, maybe that's the way it works out. But I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. We only have so much money. And if we're gonna spend money on this, we have to make it a higher priority than something else. I guess that's the point I'm making. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any other final comments? Okay, we will be, I think the questions that Chairman Bartlett raised about priorities, I mean, a water quality testing program is consistent with the sort of overall intention of this initiative. So I think there's a way that they could be balanced, but we have to have that decision to make that priority. Without objection, let's wrap that up. Thanks, everybody. I think the only other thing is the discussion of committee schedule for next year. Is there any concern about maintaining the current schedule of the second and fourth Thursday?
Fine with me.
Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, then let's just do that then. And then our next meeting would be January 11th. Anyone have any announcements? Okay, thanks everybody. Working this into your schedule. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.